Frankie Martinez. It's an honor to have you here on my show.
Thank you for thinking of me and inviting me.
Yes, I'm so lucky to meet you here. We are in Barcelona. Let's say Barcelona. We just finished the Salsa Rave event by DJ Dimitri. We've been dancing a lot of social this weekend.
Great time, beautiful event.
How many hours did you dance, do you think?
Oh, good God. I don't even want to think about it, but a lot more than, I think I danced more the first day I was here than I danced in a few months combined.
How many events do you still go to per year?
I'm moving around a lot since the pandemic. I have moments of respite and then very heavy moments. I happen to be in the middle or towards the end of a very heavy month and a half of traveling almost every weekend. Last year, I was traveling about as much as I'd had traveled ever in my career at the height of me being involved in these things. I'm trying to travel more. It's less possible to stay home and make a living just teaching classes. Since the pandemic, things changed. People's goals and the way they want to interact with the dance has shifted slightly. And so I'm forced to get out there more in order to sustain myself. But at the same time, I'm also discovering a responsibility to be a little bit of an alternative voice in the scene as much as I possibly can. And I'm kind of reintroducing myself to new generations that are far removed from the generations that remember the stuff that I was doing.
Maybe let's take it back all the way to the beginning. You started dancing how many years ago?
It's going to be 30 years soon. I guess I started officially in like late 1996, 1997, right around there. We're approaching 30 years. I'd been dancing my entire life. Music was around my entire life. I won a couple of little dance competitions in secondary school, but it was all freestyle craziness. I never did it formally. I was a martial artist first. That was what I did. And into my 20s, I was a fanatic martial artist. But dance formally as an endeavor started when I got out of the military, 1996.
And the first group that you were dancing with, was that already with Eddie Torres?
Yes, that was with Eddie Torres. I remember finding him. It took me a while to find him. I was doing ballroom first because I just looked in the yellow pages. We had a thing called the yellow pages, which was a phone book, right? And it was a book this thick. And I looked for salsa that was close to me because I came out of the Navy frantic to find somewhere to learn how to dance. And I saw salsa and I went. It was close to me. It was a ballroom place. I didn't know what that meant, and that was different. And I realized pretty quickly. And one of the teachers there was a Dominican guy named Luis. I'll never forget this man. He's like part of my story. But he's like, I know what you're looking for. You got to go to the Copacabana on Tuesday and Latin Quarter on Thursday and watch these dancers and figure out where this is all happening. And that's where I got a flyer to Eddie's classes. And even then I was a little intimidated to go. I had a friend with me that was taking the ballroom, and we both were kind of on the same journey. And so we went a few times, looked, got nervous, left, came back, and let's do what we're going to do at this time. But once we got going, I spent about 2.5 weeks with Maria and trying to get my 1 on to 2. And then I got enough nerve to jump into Eddie's like transitional beginner intermediate class. And that was it. 3 months later, I was in the company. 5 months later, I was on stage at Madison Square Garden. It was the first show I did. It was Madison Square Garden, 20,000 people. So it happened very quickly once I got there.
It's hard to imagine now somebody starting to dance salsa, taking classes for a few months, and then getting to perform in front of an audience like that.
I didn't have dance training as a youth, but I had kinesthetic physical work since I was 9 years old. I was always athletic. I was always an athlete. But I think the martial arts and what that meant in terms of my development as a person, right? Cognitively, emotionally, and physically, the training that's involved in that. That's why I was winning those dance contests when I was a kid, because I was jumping into splits and I was doing things that I was able to do with my body because of martial arts. And so in 1997, 1998, I was like the number 2 kata competitor, forms competitor in New York City. And that type of practice is like this very dynamic, like doing these forms and doing these like shapes, these choreographed movements, combat movements in a sequence that is supposed to teach you these things about combat. But they have these competitions where they're judged, for their precision, for their explosiveness, for their dynamics, for the speed, for the form. Yeah. And so I had that as a background. And I think it made me extremely unique because the way we use our bodies is a little more ballistic And seeing a salsa person be ballistic like that, and in other words, having these explosive movements, it's a different way of using the body than dance. And it was like, everybody was like, whoa, what is this?
How would you think, if you were to come out now with the first shows you were doing with the Eddie Torres group, how do you think those shows would be received now if you came out of the blue now with this group?
That's a good question. It's hard to do hypotheticals like that, because the reasons I think that that material would be seen a certain way is because of what the scene has become now. And the scene wouldn't have become that way had that material not existed in the first place, right?
It's paradoxical.
Right. And so it's hard to think about that. It's almost like making comparisons between generations. You're always doing that from a modern lens, a contemporary lens. And I find it unfair to look at things that way, because the context is in the environment of that time and what historically was happening at that time, what people's exposure was. And because of social media, on top of how the scene has percolated on its own, people are highly overexposed to hyperexposed to this stuff. And that overexposure makes your
overexposed to a certain type of dance?
Yeah. In other words, they have so much access to so much at such high levels that it's like, young men and pornography and that being so ingrained in their head. And then, an interaction doesn't have the value that it has the same way, because of, it's like exposure to violence, right? You see violence all the time, and you see somebody being wounded emotionally or physically, and it doesn't resonate with you the same way because you're used to violence at a very high level, right?
I wish at least we could have monetized it like pornography.
They took advantage. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like desensitization, right? You are, your range to be affected by something is affected by how much of this stuff you're consuming and at what level. And you see somebody doing backflips and splits and then somebody doing something that's more subtle is less impressive to you. Yeah. It's harder for you to appreciate these things, and social media is doing that in multiple ways simultaneously, not just within a genre. That inflation, they talk about physique inflation and within social media, right? With like the fitness influencers and how that just keeps getting shifting harder and harder. Yeah, exactly.
So let's take it a little bit back still to your journey.
Yeah.
You were dancing with Eddie Torres. There you danced, I think, most notably Franklin Diaz.
Yes.
One of the other dancers that many people still know now.
Yes.
Around the year 2000, this group was dismantled. Yeah. And then you founded your own company.
Yes.
Abakqua.
Yes.
Correct? Yes. Inspired by the West African religion.
Yeah. Not so much the religion, but its role in the development of Mambo. Specifically through Arsenio Rodriguez, whose father was in the Abakqua, taught him those drum rhythms, and he used those drum rhythms to form the Mambo. And I wanted to kind of harken back to the history of this stuff. I started to become very interested in the African side of these things as I started to branch out into my own and get my own idea of what I was interested in saying and how I was interested in saying it. Because there's a thing that happens to you when you're no longer under the directorship of someone who influenced you so much, and you're doing what you do when you do it. But when you're in front of them doing it and you're doing their work, you want them to like what you're doing and you want to seek position in that. And when I'm no longer worried about how Eddie feels about what I'm doing, suddenly I'm free to really consider my taste and my specific voice.
So what is the bit that you took from Eddie and what is the bit that you inserted yourself?
I think everything I could learn from Eddie, I absorbed, and I still teach the fundamentals. I really believe that his systemization, I haven't seen anything that rivals the systemization and its potential, not just the system as it exists to be observed, but the things that it points to as possibilities. And that's what allowed me. Had I not had those foundations, I wouldn't have had the access to developing the way that I developed. And I appreciate that tremendously and continue to use that template. Mm-hmm. And so that stuff is still there. It's a matter of, what does it mean if I take that stuff? And I realized right away I wasn't trying to do classical dance. I wasn't trying to compete with classical dance. I wanted our thing to have the room to breathe, to show what it could be if we were to really focus on having methods to develop the characteristics that form the basis culturally, ethnically, and physically of the art form.
So the style that you would describe your group as, was that already Afro Latin Funk?
Yes. I think that happened very early on. And I think it happened, you know, we always called what we did mambo. But I think when I started to develop the methodology, the pedagogy, when that started to solidify, then we had to kind of, the terms that were in use weren't enough to encapsulate what was happening, especially the way the terms were being used. You know, salsa was being used as a singular thing now all of a sudden, when its real meaning is much more an umbrella term for all these very rich, layered things. And had salsa still meant what it meant, I might have been okay continuing to call it salsa. But I felt like saying salsa evoked something completely different than what we were doing. Saying mambo kind of evoked a ballroom thing. And I wanted to make sure that they would have to ask me, you know, and if I say Afro Latin Funk, because we're also including in our lexicon, we're including like Latin soul and the whole, you know, Latin funk boogaloo.
Makes you think of
movement.
boogaloo.
All of that is part of it. And its origins, right? Blues and jazz and Motown and all that stuff. All these things resonate. Even Elvis Presley was using clave in songs and stuff like that. It was everywhere, you know? Mm-hmm. And saying Afro Latin Funk forces somebody to say, wow, what is that? Like, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. I had a thing with that, as you can see, with the name of the company, Abaquá, with the you know, giving a name to the system, right? And I really use Afro Latin Funk as it's a philosophy, right? Mm. It's like if you take Afro Caribbean dance and you develop it the way, you know, musicians develop their abilities in music, or artists develop their abilities in art, you know, that you have a time of apprenticeship that's formalized, that allows you to develop the things that would happen to us naturally. Mm. But now we're isolating those things and we're pinpointing them and figuring out how to enhance them so that they become almost otherworldly, the way other disciplines like ballet, you know, once you're in that top 1%, you're doing things with your body that, you know, mm-hmm. shouldn't be possible for most people.
It sounds like across this mission that you had, part of it was really the formalization of dance, which of course with the system is already something that Eddie also did. Yeah, is making it more comparable to some of the other more formal dance styles.
I think the interesting thing also is that this dance has always been a street thing, mm-hmm. and the formalization wasn't something that I was concerned with in a universal sense. In other words, I didn't care that everybody was doing it this way. I wanted to make sure that generations could benefit from previous generations, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's what was lacking. Everybody was reinventing the dance in every generation all over again, all over again, all over again. To this day, it still happens that way, that we're not truly benefiting from the generation before in terms of being studious in what the previous generation discovered in their process and using that to make our process more efficient in our times, so that the next generation has a new, more efficient version that they can make more efficient. And when you have 100, 200 years of that, you get, you know, jazz, you get ballet, you get these high level art forms.
So in your ideal world, would we see more of vocabulary for salsa in a similar way like ballet would have, with all the positions, the names of the movements?
My thing is that I don't know why it's necessary for people to consider it in such a broad sense. In other words, I don't love the fact that ballet is just ballet, right? Mm-hmm. I enjoy the fact that someone's lineage of ballet is specific, and that lineage has a syllabus and a slightly unique philosophy and maybe slightly different methods, extra methods, along with some of the fundamental things. And then you have generations within that lineage, and then you have multiple lineages around the world of people that are putting in their input, but they're putting in that input generationally, right? Mm-hmm. Not that the world has to be homogenized into this one, never a thought, right? And I don't think is the way to keep something healthy, right? You know, in contemporary dance, you have the Dunham and you have all these different techniques, right? Of things that people have come up with that adds to the story. And those things have their process and their progression, and those things are respected as things unto themselves and not things that everybody's supposed to adhere to, right? But yeah, that those types of things are necessary. And I think what I was going to say earlier is that Eddie's systemization existed in order for people outside of the culture to have an easier time having entree into being able to do this. And that means that people that want to do this for a living have access to, right, to a public, exactly, a customer base, right?
In a certain way, what you would like to set up is the lineage of your style, of the Afro Latin Funk. And what is it about that style that you would want people to take away from it? Or if they were to study, what would differentiate them from other students studying other lineages?
It's the goal philosophy, right? Is to understand that we are trying to become living, breathing, walking music, right? And so understanding that, and I use the word become because at the beginning, anything else would be an abstraction and hard to solidify in your mind. But for me, it's discover, right? Because I believe that we're already walking, talking music. I think we are the thing music is referring to, right? And that we resonate with music, or music resonates with us so much because it reminds us of that, right? It's expressing things that are innately human that maybe not in the conscious realm for us. And it fires up all these things that we already understand. And I love to hear people say, you know, you express the music, expressing the music. I want to express the music. And I'm always thinking the music is already expressing you. Mm-hmm. And the music is already an expression of a thing, right? And that's another kind of like small, universal, like misunderstanding of respect for music on its own, right? The music is doing that very well on its own. It doesn't need you to help it do its thing. These people know what they're doing, and this stuff is sophisticated and primal, right? It's something connected to us in an ancient, primitive way. What I'm always asking of people is to possibly consider the fact that you're trying to discover your musicness, right? How you are the thing, right? And so when you are doing the thing or you're manifesting the thing along with the audible representation of it, you are adding to the conversation. You're not trying to enhance things that are already there. Mm-hmm. You are your own instrument. You bring your instrument to the jam session and you add your input to this thing. You just happen to be operating on the visual realm, and it changes your perspective when you're not thinking about athletics and you're not thinking about necessarily your how pretty you look first, right? Mm-hmm. You're thinking about how do we develop these things, and just like music, you know, you want it to sound. You want the sound to be captivating, and you want there to be beauty in what you're doing, but also sadness and ugliness and crunchiness and pain and all those things that you hear in music all the time, which don't require you to smile every minute of the day, right? Mm-hmm. And those things are there in the music, and those are the things we recognize. And yet in the dance, we're expressing the song, but we're expressing it with a smile, and everything is kind of entertainment. If we're manifesting our musicness, we're discovering at the same time that the observer is discovering and experiencing, you know. It's like a meditative thing. It's a subconscious communication. It's the Holy Ghost. It's the person in the bembe that is in a trance, right? It's you being possessed by your subconscious that is kind of connected to everybody else's subconscious.
So compared to other lineages, it sounds like your philosophy, your method is more of an abstract thing, and actually something, a way of thinking that seems that you can apply to almost any other way of dancing salsa.
Yeah.
And that in that sense, it's something that's a bit more encompassing than other lineages that are more like, okay, are we dancing on one style, or are we dancing what nowadays is called mambo in New York, or more Afro-Cuban fusion, what we see becoming more popular now?
I don't consider those things styles. They're because when you talk about things in that capacity, you're talking about things in their infancy. In other words, you're talking about grade school and secondary school, right? You talk about on one or on two, you're talking about methods of delivery of information. You know, are you using a textbook or are you using a laptop? That's what you're saying in essence, right? If you're dancing on two, you're using a laptop. You're dancing on one, you're using a textbook. Does it really matter if you're using a textbook or, right? Because the content is the point. It's not the delivery method that gets you the content. It's the information, right? These little changes in perspective sometimes change how people. I always tell people, I'm not doing what you're doing. You know, I don't do what you do, and so you're not in a position to judge what I'm doing because you're judging it. I'm not doing what you're doing. You can't compare us. You do what you do, and you do it great. I'm doing something different, and I can easily kind of demonstrate why we're thinking about what we're doing in different ways.
So if we say, okay, on one, on two are just the delivery in terms of contents, what are the main lineages that you see now in the world of salsa?
I don't see a lot of lineage, and that's why I think I brought it up in that capacity, is because I think social media is creating homogenous influence, and also the Congress conference international format and its educational input, right? In other words, people being exposed to teachers from all around the world, and a lot of times the same teachers, right? In different places, they get hooked onto these specific teachers that they are exposing people to. And what ends up happening, these people, those are the people they're seeing on Instagram. Those are the people that they're taking classes from. And even though they're taking classes in their home city, their home studio, they're getting all this input, and sometimes contradictory input, right? From one moment to another, from all this stuff. But because of how these algorithms work and the way that people are exposed to these things, people are kind of getting exposed all to the same things. And there becomes a standard of like what it looks like to be. I noticed there are certain moves, like these son basic movements that I feel like people almost neurotically have to include in everything they post, almost like they're trying to make sure that they fulfill a criteria that's expected in order for it to be judged as appropriately salsa, right? And I find it so intensely strange, but I think that is a product of this sense of homogenization that's happening. And I think that's one of the things that really separated the pre-social media time from this time, is that when you encountered people from another region, the distinction was so palpable, and it was so easy to recognize after you were familiar with these different regional interpretations of what was happening. You could see them right away. It's like, these people are from this, even within New York, you could tell where somebody was studying by the way they dance. You could tell they were, you know, these are uptown dance. These are guys from the Bronx. These are the guys, you know.
You think that's not the case anymore?
No. Everybody's mimicking the same and parroting the same ideas. And the other thing is that we're in an echo chamber here in the salsa community, is a bubble, right? Like, we're dancing for each other. Nothing else is like that, right? Like, and so the input it's like inbreeding, right? That you're not considering the world at large. It's all the sensibilities of the people that are involved in it. And that tends to skew how you perceive of a thing.
Yeah. For me, what seems a little bit contradictory, and maybe you can clarify this, is there seems to be a desire to have a more formalization of the dance, which is now happening also because there's wider access, because maybe before you would have more distinct styles, but also communication was more difficult perhaps between different dancers. So also in a social setting, which arguably might be just the goal of salsa, it would have been more difficult for them to communicate. Whereas now, we share more of the same basics. My partner dances a son movement, which has become part of basic vocabulary. I can respond to that.
Absolutely.
So on the one hand, there is desire for formalization, but on the other hand, you say that this homogeneity is something that frustrates you as well.
Yeah, because it's not homogeneousness in terms of, because if communication is the goal, right, then the methodology has to be something that operates on universal principles that the average individual can understand and interpret. It's logic, right? It's logic that's operating in a logical way. If I do this, if I put my hand behind your shoulder, I want you to come towards me. If I place my hand in front of your chest, I want you to stay away from me. I don't have to come from somewhere to kind of understand that, right? And so the problem is in the stylistic representations, and people are dancing with each other, but they're not dancing with each other very well. You know, I don't think that the systems that people have in terms of their homogenization allows them to jump around together, but their ability to be adaptable and fluid in a circumstance like that, where you may be confronted with somebody has a very different interpretation than you have, that ability to adapt to that situation and still make something of that engagement, right? It's almost like I bring a sitar to sit down with a jazz trumpet player, and I've got to figure out how to make these things work together. But music, right, has a thing. It has a universality to it, right? The same way I'm saying that certain communicational cues might have a universality to them. And so the stylistic representations being a certain way, if I hold my chin high when I do something, and all of a sudden the whole world is holding their chin high, that doesn't facilitate people in Bermuda dancing better with people. It's everybody's parroting these things that they think they're supposed to do in order to fulfill the characteristics of the dance. We always say in Zen that, you know, don't talk to me about the characteristics of a thing. Talk to me about the thing, right? Don't show me a picture of your wife and say, this is my wife. That's not your wife, right? You know, what's your wife like? Well, she has blonde hair. That's not your wife. Those are those are characteristics. They're things, you know, the reality of the thing is such a different thing. And so the homogenization of presentation is my issue. Yeah. The ability to be fluid and to be responsive and to come up with systems that will work no matter what you're presented with, that's the important thing, right? That's the thing that allows you to then engage with people because I find that people are extremely insistent on their way of understanding something when they're social dancing. Yeah. For example, everybody is holding lead palm up nowadays, right? Eddie taught us from the beginning that lead palm down, right? And 2 fingers. I'm dancing with someone and I recover them palm down if I can do it. Yeah. Because sometimes they will automatically look for that position aggressively. Elbow is high. Yeah. Sometimes I establish the position and they will try to change it. Yeah. And in classes, I will ask people as an experiment, let's try to do this whole class palm down. And there's extreme difficulty in their ability to do that. Yep. But I have no problem dancing palm up if I had to. No problem at all, right? Yeah. And your ability to not be fluid enough to make that adjustment says something, right?
But I think it's also the level at which we consider this. I think for most artists that dance professionally, I think it will be quite easy for them to adapt to this. Yeah. Whereas, of course, it's more difficult to expect that from students.
I wonder. I would love to do an experiment, right?
But also in general, your comments about the frustration about homogeneity, is that all mostly at the level of artists, or do you also have a certain expectation of the public, of the average dancer? Because you know salsa is a dance where the average person, especially for leaders, it takes many years before they even get comfortable with basic vocabulary.
Certainly.
So to expect of them some sort of authentic, self-made style, too much to ask.
No, it's not them. Nobody is to blame, right? It is a natural product of popularization of anything, right? And it's the teachers are teaching the principles, right? And they are the ones that are establishing the things that are important amongst those principles. And so the lack of those things being involved in what happens in a class, because most of the time, and of course not all of the time, but most of the time, you open a dance studio as a business, right? You have students and they're your customers, and you're trying to advertise to get more students so you have more customers, so the health of the business is maintained and continue. If you have a business that requires of the patrons to be extremely highly disciplined and extremely interested in long-term self-development, you don't have a great business model normally, right? You want to offer people, because it's most people that are into something don't realize they want to be serious about it right off the bat, right? That's something that has to simmer a little bit and develop, and
You need role models as well. It
yeah,
needs to be an ecosystem.
right. And so you may see somebody and say, "Man, that's amazing. I would love to be like that." And then you find out what it takes to be like that, and you go, maybe I'll deal with it from afar, And so it's these factors, the commercial factor of it, right? The commerce component is another highly influential component, right? And it means that a teacher is under high pressure to maintain the health of the business, and it may mean making compromises. And at the beginning, those compromises they may even be benefits sometimes early on in something's development. And then there's a tipping point where now the thing is getting lost completely in these compromises, but you got a lot of people coming in the door, right? And so it's not that these things should be highly developed. It's that they're not even considered as important or present. And, whether someone can engage in something at a high level or not is not ever the point for me. The point is that we respect the fact that we're on a journey and that we're all in different places, and that the journey is endless. And so, we're all basically at different levels of zero, right? And that it's never, you're not understanding something is never a problem. Because that is the norm statistically, right? To expect people to understand something is kind of silly. It's a better assumption to assume people don't understand something. But you hear teachers talk, you say something and you get a question about, wow, but I've always heard this. And you go, wow, it's interesting that somebody would say that to someone, because for me, it's obvious that it will put them on a certain path that will keep them from being able to ever have a chance to get on the road to possibly developing something that would be important and beneficial to them. And so, yeah, everybody always says it starts with the teachers, and it's, but the teachers are, I understand, I get it. The teachers are under certain pressures, and they may be under those pressures subconsciously, and they may be attracted to things because of the reason that the pressure exists in the first place. We're being operated on in so many levels. But the thing is, if I'm going to exist here, I might as well share some wisdom that may possibly change the way somebody perceives something. And maybe, that inspires somebody to seek a different type of teacher, or for a teacher to consider how they're packaging their material and what's important to them in a different way. Or even just to realize that maybe the classification of what they do is understood in a different way, because it doesn't include these things that these seeds that I may be planting,
Are we blaming schools for not being unique enough in their style, or not allowing or pushing their students to explore more self-expression perhaps in their classes? I'm trying to get it down to more precisely.
The thing I precisely said was, I'm not blaming the schools for anything, right? I think you're stuck on this homogenization thing, and whether that's stylistic, and yes, it's stylistic, but it's philosophical at its heart, right? And because the philosophy is not driving what people are doing, it's easy for everybody to start looking the same because they think they're supposed to look a certain way.
Yeah.
But you start to see concepts that start to come widely used after other concepts that were better functioning were widely used. And then you wonder, right? Because the logic isn't there, right? The logic in the fact that you're using this particular thing and all of a sudden this is the popular thing, but it's demonstrably by those who understand it's demonstrably less effective, but that's what everybody's doing. And then everybody looks to me like I'm an alien to change what I'm doing to conform to everybody's misunderstanding because that misunderstanding is more widespread now. And I don't come from that school, right? I come from the school of understanding. Understanding governs that. By adopting what's popular, I may be rejecting what my teacher, who I respect tremendously, has imparted to me, which I have over 30 years demonstrated its effectiveness, and it's allowed me to continue to evolve. And that's my thing, right? My thing is not about right or wrong. It's always about whether the ceiling's open. If the ceiling is closed, if you can't keep developing, and not everybody's going to make it to the ceiling to have to worry about whether it's open or closed. But I can't, as a teacher, as an educator, as a person who's seeking, as a seeker, I can't not set you up so that if the ability and the moment arrives for you in your life that you want to go past the ceiling, that you have the tools available to do that, right? Because I set that up at the beginning. If I say, well, you may never have to worry about that, so you can do it any way you want, and then that person, as a teacher, I'm kind of failing my responsibility. I'm not making that path completely available to them, you know? And that's the thing. It's not about presentation. It's not about packaging. Those things are not necessarily the things that are homogenous. It's how everything is. It's this paradox. Exactly. Everybody, usually, especially in my time, especially when I was very popular, everybody wanted to be unique. Nobody wanted to be, it was very kind of like looked down upon that everybody looked like me at the time. And all the dancers were very frustrated that everybody was copying what I was doing. Isn't it funny, right? Everybody was pissed about that. Everybody was totally up in arms. Oh, there's another Frankie clone and a Frankie clone, and everybody's wearing white shoes, and everybody's wearing this hat, everybody's tucking their chin in. Everybody was pissed about that. Now everybody looks like everyone. Everybody looks the same, and that's how it's supposed to be, you know? And so it's like this, during that time, it was so offensive to people that I had dancers, artists, that would tell me, I always wanted to study with you, but I never wanted to look like you. And I never wanted to be seen as someone who looked like you. And I would always say to them, no one I trained looks like me. Only the people that tried to copy me from afar look like me to the point that it's offensive, right?
So on this point, I'm just trying to give it my frame of reference, right? Because I've been dancing actively for maybe 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
If I think of the big names that now go to many congresses, and also I know many of their students as friends or from the things that they publish on social media, I can see quite clear differences. I can see
Mm-hmm.
if somebody studied with Antonio Berardi. I can see if somebody trained for a choreo with Teddy. I can see if somebody has been dancing with Iroko or learned from Adolfo, or if they've been very different styles, maybe in Italy where they really enjoy mixing with more Afro-Cuban roots. I see very clear differences also in the partner work. If you think the influence that Panagiotis has had, a lot of this movement coming now in Europe and making the partner work dance, as you can see here in this event, very playful with a lot of arm flicks and things. I can see very distinguishable styles. Of course, there's a lot of similarities, but am I missing like a bigger range of possibilities that you think is out there?
Yeah, I think it's again, it's access. It's what's influencing these people to be the way they're being, right? And the fact that because people have access to Iroko and so and Fulano, and they're taking their workshops on the same day, 1 hour after the next hour, and a choreography is a choreography. Somebody's gonna, they're gonna mold you the way they want to mold you into their thing. And everybody's competing, right? Everybody's competing for attention in some capacity. And so, yeah, everybody's trying to, do the thing in a different capacity so that they have a place in the conversation. But in terms of presentation, those differences are, again, they're superficial, right? The fact that I speak to so many people who recognize the homogenization and the fact that the everyone says to me that I am an alien and completely unique and completely from a different planet is interesting, right? It merits further investigation, right? I don't remember feeling like this even in the 2010s, right? It's much more recent. And I think it's because also, you're seeing things on Instagram and they're packaged in a certain way. And that packaging is another homogenization, right? It's like people know the formulas for how they want to do these things and how they want to present these things. And so that packaging starts to become super redundant. And then when the material is feeling redundant, you're feeling like you're in a loop, right? Like you're in a Groundhog Day. But yeah, the personal expression part of it, the methodology is supposed to be there to free you, not to bind you. And yeah, you have freedom, but usually that freedom, what I was going to say earlier is that the paradox that I was going to refer to is that everybody wanted to be different at that time because, uniqueness was the golden goose, right? And yet they all had the same ideas about how to do that, right? I'm going to take a little from this and a little from that and a little from this. And what they ended up doing was looking exactly the same, right? And they didn't stand out. And they didn't stand out because it wasn't what they were taking. It was the philosophy of taking a little bit from everywhere that was the same. And it ended up resulting in this very similar thing that didn't allow them to stand out. And a lot of stuff is like that, right? A lot of stuff is counterintuitive. And you think you're going to go to a concert early and camp out the night before so that you can beat the line. And you get there and there's 200 people that had the same idea, and you're like, damn it. It's like, that's not thinking outside the box. Everybody thinks that way. I'm going to go early so I beat the crowd. Like everybody says that is a smart thing to do. But what happens when everybody says I'm going to go early to beat the crowd? Everybody's going early. Now you got to try to figure something else out, right? It's not genuine in its authenticity. It's the normal kind of logical progression that we might have that has been proven to be faulty, but we all kind of arrive at the same conclusions unless we really kind of study the thing in depth and understand the nuance and are able to navigate that in a different way. And I think that the attempt to be different is a good way to end up looking like everybody else. And also because you're already unique and that uniqueness manifests in a certain way. And when you see that in the top 1%, you're seeing people who have curated the dance to their strengths and to the things they do well and the things they're interested in. And you see those differences there. But when those differences are all being, right, and people are saying, I'm going to take a little bit of Iroko's difference and a little bit of this person's difference, a little bit of Terry's difference, that's what everybody's doing, right? And so when you start to filter it down, you start seeing that the new people that are coming up after them are these scrapbooks of the influences that they're all kind of dealing with in one capacity or another. And it starts to produce this thing that's very similar, sometimes at a high level. And of course, with little characteristic differences because we are different. That uniqueness is supposed to come out. And I think we get locked into rigid ideas of what that's supposed to mean, especially when it comes to the dance and how that is attained. And I think that using a method, a strong, proven method over generations that will ultimately free you so that you can find yourself. And then when you learn how to learn, then you're an adult and you develop in ways you never considered,
So I'm going to approach this from a different angle and say this. Like, we just finished an event here, Salsa Rave, which is a little bit of a new concept, very DJ-led event. The event is growing rapidly, almost doubled in size. And all I saw this weekend was happy faces. It was really pure social dancing. There were a few workshops. There was one show, but it was pure social dancing.
Yeah.
And I can say, okay, a lot of these students, they've all been taking classes for a while, some for maybe 10 years or more, some people just 1 year. They've been learning from these teachers in this environment that seems to be converging to a bit of a more homogenous style. But I look around here and I see the salsa scene, for my framework, at its best. And also I know on a global level, salsa in the last 25 years, it's probably at one of its biggest levels in terms of number of events and audiences. There's no hard data for this. And then I can say, to everything we've said till now, maybe one could say, so what? Maybe people are not as unique. Maybe I can't look at someone and say, you are from uptown, you're from downtown. But everybody's here having an amazing time dancing social. Also, I look around and I see everybody, even beginners. Maybe they're doing the same move, but the way that they do it, their facial expressions, I see personality everywhere.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is like coming from another angle. But so what if I say, so what?
Yeah.
To this,
No, none of it means anything. And I think the funny thing is that this event is unique because it's unique, right? And you're seeing something unique, right? And people are enjoying it because it is the way it is. And those people are people that might be excluded at a regular event in terms of how they feel about their ability to participate, because they don't feel free to be as expressive, because there's a different vibe going on in those places. This is the way this has always been done, right? In other words, this is the way it's supposed to happen, right? It's supposed to be, was intended and evolved to be an internal experience for the participants. The thing is, if we could take this energy and we could allow that to inform what happens on stage, it will have this back and forth effect that I think would be healthy. But when in the broader context, in the broader experiences with all these events, when you're looking at them, this is an anomaly, right? This is one of like 3 weekends that I've had since the pandemic that I feel like I'm home in some capacity, right? Yeah, and I, like I said, I feel like the idea of this feeling influencing how we present things artistically on stage, as opposed to what people are trying to do on stage influencing what's happening down here on the dance floor, and the enjoyment being secondary to the attention seeking and to the trying to garner status and the other more sinister things that may happen, then we start to lose that. And then the smiles are different, and then the interactions are different, and they have different implications. But yeah, this is what I love to see, and this is when and sometimes I don't even recognize that, oh my God, this is amazing, because I'm home. Like, I have to think about it in retrospect and go, man, I didn't hear one bachata, or I didn't like have one dance where I was totally wanted to rip my eyeballs out, or a song where I was like, what's going on? No, I didn't mean to stick that in there. No.
I'll cut it out.
Yes. No,
it's great. We go full circle because we came from salsa, street dance, social dance. We talked about the formalization of the dance, the methods.
Yeah.
And now we're back here again.
Exactly.
Social dance. And for us, again, to have a new way of expressing ourselves and use this formal education as a new tool, as a language for us to, again, find our own self-expression and enjoy our time here together.
It's about that. It's about, at the end of the day, that we're they say there's no study worth studying that isn't a study of the self, and that uniqueness should be an individual thing. And by exploring your uniqueness, you take care of your part of the bigger whole, and you become connected to other people who are in the process of discovering their uniqueness, And that's the beauty of it. That should be the beauty of it, and not us trying to be something other people expect us to be, or have set up to be because it's popular or it's attractive, but that we are genuine, and we try to be true to ourselves in some capacity. Yeah.
Well said.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yes. Time is running short.
Yes, sir.
But I think we will meet again soon.
Absolutely,
so if we have more things we want to talk about.
Definitely.
If you guys have ideas, you can drop it in the comments. I think there's so many topics to explore.
Yeah.
So much history to unpack. And I loved having this conversation with you to pick your mind a little bit on, well, we went in a bit more of a deep dive on the authenticity in dance. And I really appreciate you taking your time for this. I think I will see you again in Istanbul.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yes.
Awesome,
Thanks.
awesome. Yeah,
So,
see you there.
Thanks so much for making the time.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I hope to have you again on the show soon. And so, yes, please do engage with this content. Do tell us what you think. Share your opinions down below. And this will be on Spotify and YouTube. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
And I wish you safe travels.
Absolutely. Likewise.
Sorry.